Hi, my name's Emma and I'm a challenger.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Challenge State, where we discuss all about the mental game, covering performance tips and strategies you can implement to become more successful, bringing you knowledgeable thought leaders from around the world. Listen up and let's get started.
Thank you for coming onto the show and spending some time with us, Emma.
No, thank you for having me on.
So those who follow you on social media know you coach many of the top CrossFit athletes around the world. But before we get into all that, let's start by telling us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Whereabouts do you live now? What do you do for a hobby? And anything we probably don't know about you that might be interesting.
You know what? I love that because I generally don't get asked these questions. If someone wants to know, what I can do for them. So yeah, I'm originally I was born in London, Waterloo, then grew up in Essex. I now live in the northeast with my 3 children, my 3 rescue dogs and my husband. Hobby-wise, I love to exercise and train. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I do hobby-wise.
Awesome. 3 kids and 3 dogs, is that what you said?
Yes.
Wow, big family. Fair and awesome. So let's go back to in time where you grew up and what was your childhood like when you were younger and going through school. What would your friends say about you as a teenager?
Do you know what? That's a really interesting question because it was very recently I put a post on my Facebook. So my Facebook, I kind of keep it as connecting with my friends. Obviously, I've left back at home and the friends that I have here. And my son, obviously we're currently in the pandemic, but we was able to start going to the parks. And my eldest son, who's 13, had asked me to go and play some basketball with him. So I was like, that's a win, like 13. Mm-hmm. I was like, yeah, I'll go. And he absolutely destroyed me. And inside, I was fuming. I was like, oh, he's so good. And like, I can't believe that he's like, because this is just when you're competitive, right? But you don't really realise until you're aware. So I had kind of put on the post that I'm getting up extra early tomorrow while he's sleeping. And I put the watt bike out in the garden, got the basketball hoop like pulled out, and was literally on the bike getting off and then taking shots, ready to go back to the park with him. So I've just put a picture of him like sort of shooting the hoop and then just my little rant there. And so many people that I went to school with, so I'm 36 now, had put, this does not surprise me, or oh, I miss your competitiveness. But the really interesting thing is I didn't notice that in myself when I was at school. I can look back and I just see a girl that just wanted to be accepted and fit in. And at that time, my competitiveness didn't fit that. It didn't fit that puzzle. So I'd actually lost it a little bit. Mm. So I had never really realised that people had seen it and also seen it in a positive way. So it's quite interesting you asked that question because that was literally last week I posted that.
So you're very competitive.
From a very young age, yeah, definitely. I played all sports, but it wasn't necessarily I loved the sports. I loved the feeling of it. I loved the learning. I loved being in teams. I loved building people up in the teams. Even when I was younger, I'd always didn't want anyone to be left out. And I guess quite naturally, I had, talent is a gift. We can thank our parents for it. So I found probably sport a lot more easier than what I did academic side, but I loved what come with it.
Gotcha. No, wow. So what sports do you play when you're younger?
Football. So I was like the only girl, this is back in the days. It's so different now. Football, netball, horse riding. I grew up, my next door neighbour was a professional boxer, John McDermott. So he fought like Danny Williams, Tyson Fury. So I sort of grew up going to like York Hall and watching the Ricky Hattons and Amir Khans. And I used to always want to be a boxing manager. Like, everything I kind of wanted to do never really fit the bill of being a girl back then. Anything hockey, I signed up for every single team at senior school. So I didn't care if I was good at it or not. I just enjoyed playing it.
Interesting. Oh, cool. So what did you do after school? Did you go into uni or did you go straight into work?
No. So after school, I was kind of brought up in like the belief of you just got to go out there like and hustle.
Okay.
Yeah, so my mum was a female in a quite male dominant environment. She used to sort of run offices all over. My stepdad was a very hard worker. So previous to my mum meeting my stepdad, she was a single mum. So I guess for a very long time, she was trying to prove, and consistently. And I guess her belief was, if you like working hard is love, like it's, well, no, look, I'm providing, so I'm loving for my children. But what was really missed was that emotional availability. And also, like, my mum had her own mental health struggles that wasn't very apparent because of society or how society sort of was then. So that sort of really went under the radar. But as a child, you only know what you know, right? So what I learned very young, which I can now connect the dots, is probably why it's an element of what makes me great as a coach. Is from a very young age, I had to learn to read behaviours and emotions, because then that's how I decide who I needed to be at that particular time.
Interesting. So you just went out hustling.
Yep,
for
yeah.
work,
So I went to college, studied sports science.
Okay.
But I was really eager to kind of travel and move. I moved to Spain. But also I just want to acknowledge that this time, on the outside, I come across as really having myself together. Yeah, because the belief was like, if you've got materialistic things, or, and I had a really great defense mechanism of coming across confident when actually I really wasn't. I had very low self-esteem, low self-worth, but I could portray a way. So people around me would see, like, oh, it's all right for you, you're just doing this. But inside I was like, oh no, I just want to be accepted, or I just want someone to validate everything that I do. And that's because I was very driven, but I didn't know what drive was. So I was driven, but also I was looking for acceptance and validation. But with that, my drive took me traveling. I started working in sales in Spain. I've become the only female and then the youngest female doing what we was doing. So this become a bit of a pattern, even to where I am now. And yeah, so I continued doing that and looked like I was succeeding, but I wasn't. I had really poor coping mechanisms. And yeah, my kind of big turning point for me was, so first of all, everything that I do now, everyone's got a story, right? And I never really get asked about mine. So I think it's great you have asked. I'm happy to share. Because people just see where you are now, right? So when people hear who I'm working with or what I'm doing, they're like, wow, that's great. And then we kind of make our own assumptions. But for me, so it was when I was 21, I had just come back from being in Greece, celebrating my birthday with my best friend, which that sounds amazing. I was flying back to Marbella, to go back to work. But I'd been out all night. I had a stinking hangover, because this is what I did. That was just one of my coping. I used to want to train, but then I used to also become that other version of me because I felt more confident as her. And my brother, who was 18, so brother and sister are twins, at the time I was like, oh, do you want to come play a game of basketball with me and my friends? So I lived in like a little village, to which I declined because I was hungover. And unfortunately that day he never returned. His heart stopped whilst he was taking a shot like a basketball shot, and he died instantly. And from there I still continued, so it was like, oh, I took on my persona of I've got to look after everyone. Then it was like, no, then the avoidance kicked in, like, just go back to work, so just forget it. So then the turning point for me was really acknowledging I had zero coping mechanisms, and clearly my ego was already very fragile, because to have this external confident persona, so you go under the radar when you have that, right? That's why it's a defense mechanism. To then just the feeling of just, because you can't cope, of just not wanting to be here, how you internalize everything. And my doctor was a great doctor. He'd known me since I was little, like Dr. Joe. And I remember he sat me down and he said, you either take these tablets or I'm going to have to seriously get you looked at like, we're going to have to put you in somewhere, you know, so if we meant getting sectioned or whatnot.
Oh.
So I promised him I'd take these tablets, but I'd grew up with my mum who self-medicated the whole time. So there was something within me was like, but that doesn't work because you've seen that. And then it was just the voice in my head was like, there's got to be more than this. Like, yes, I'm grieving, but it's not just that. But I literally had no intelligence of what it was, like none. So I didn't know. So I'm asking this question to myself, and I just remember just the raw pain of just not wanting to be, but that voice just being loud, like, just look for something. And it, you know, back in them days, it wasn't Google like we have now. It was practically dial up, and I didn't know what I was looking for. Had never heard of self-development. Was very aware of psychology. I'd studied sports psychology, but still that was very like niche. It wasn't the same. And then we heard of mental health, you know, which still it wasn't the same. I just didn't know what it was, but I knew I didn't want to take the medication. I knew there must have been something else. And this is where I sort of started my journey of self-development, which was like sort of phase one. Coming across people like Bob Proctor and Zig Ziglar, and I just was eating it up because it had to save my life. So that's where it was. This was got to save me, because if it's not this, well, the alcohol didn't, you know, all the other stuff that I didn't. I knew I didn't want to take them tablets. And yeah, I just become obsessed because I started understanding what drive is, started understanding that, wow, this is a muscle. This is an actual muscle. What? So I can relearn what? So I've been conditioned. So if I haven't got a skill to do something, I can learn it. And the obsession just, yeah. And it was all for me first. It was just, because I just didn't want to feel this pain no more. So yeah, that was my starting point.
At what point was this when you started to get into the Bob Proctors and the Zig Ziglars and more self-development?
That was the day that I come back from the doctors. I was 21.
Right. Got it. Interesting. Yeah. Wow. So now take me back to before you started mindset coaching. What were you doing beforehand? And how did you first get into it?
So how did I first get into mindset coaching?
Yes.
So literally that journey.
Right.
Yeah. So I'd always been into, Steve Jobs has a great quote, which is, you can only join the dots looking back. So I'd always seen that I wanted to be a service to others. I can see that I was always driven and like results driven, but I could always see there's a different way. So I was always in the sales environment. I grew up in sales offices, you know, all over. I used to run like big salon companies, but they'd bring me in as a troubleshooter. And there was always something I'd do different, because they'd look at people's statistics. Like, right, they're not making the sales they need to go. Whereas I would ask the people the questions. Like, what are you worried about? What are you scared of? Oh, well, I don't want my client to think that I'm pushing this. Well, no, but look, you're actually doing them a service, because for them to maintain. So I'd always done that without realizing like that it was actually more than what I was doing. So after I took some time out to work on myself, which I had to, yes, so it highlighted my mental health was very low, my self-esteem, my self-worth. And I know I'm not the only person that's ever felt this and gone through this. There's so many of us, but then also I carried a lot of shame for feeling that way, because I felt it was associated to weakness.
Right.
But through the working on myself, I started reconnecting. So I started reconnecting back with my sports and training, because one of the beliefs that I got after my brother's death was, if I get my heart rate up, I'm going to die. Now, there was no facts involved in that. That's just how I internalized it. So everyone in the family internalized it different. So now what did that do? That deprived me of something that I loved, my outlet, which was exercise, you know, team sports. I totally removed myself from that. But then what was my coping mechanism? Alcohol, smoking, you know, just total self-sabotage, which has an even more negative effect. But because my belief system was so strong, if I get my heart rate, if I go for a run, if I go and play netball, I could drop dead. So overcoming that fear, you know, which is why I really enjoyed CrossFit. I've been around CrossFit about 10 years.
Wow.
It challenged me to face that fear with purpose, and my understanding of how the mind works, and that I can call that out, and, you know, neurons that fire together, wire together. to learn how to not be so judgmental in that way that we're conditioned, but to be able to see it for what it is. And it wasn't just a linear journey, you know. So this is another thing. When you're seeking out of desperation, there are people that can market themselves very well for those people because they just want your money. Yeah. And I come across plenty of them, but I'm so grateful for that as well, because then when I become into a position where not only do I reconnect with sport again, but I could also reconnect with my love of being a service to others. I knew, like it was just, I knew with total certainty, if I'm going to do this, it's going to be of value. It's not to be of importance. That's what I used to seek, because I felt if you was important, then you mattered. But through going through my own journey, I got very clear early on, well, if I'm going to go, you know, take my own jump into creating this service, it's got 100% be of value.
Gotcha. So at what point did you get into mindset coaching other clients?
So actively, as in officially, because I've been doing it before then. We're about just come to 10th year.
Okay. Gotcha. And what made you get into it, into coaching?
So obviously my own process, then looking back, I could see if I had known this then, if, you know, so my stepping away in sport, I would only let myself get so far, but then I didn't want to stand out. Or I always wanted everything to be perfect, so I feared failing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, all these kind of things. I'm like, there's so many people feeling this, but there's real practical skills and knowledge that they could learn and apply. The same as in business. You know, witnessing so many people being burnt out and leaning into really poor coping skills because we're so focused on success that fulfillment's totally been neglected.
Wow. No. Okay, got it. Makes sense. Cool. So why do you continue doing what you do? Is kind of an obvious question, but I want you to answer it.
Yeah, definitely. Just so I feel I'm committed. And to be honest with you, I know this is the thing, right, with quotes. Yeah. Like they're great, but they're not everything. They're kind of like, they can be the match that lights the fire, but there's so much more that goes into it. I kind of also knew, because of how the road that I took, I felt could have been so much better and effective, but there was no other way around me at that time. So I sort of took the hard road, and I was like, there has got to be a better way. Like, this is very complex stuff. Surely we can make it simpler. And then it was certain talks that I'll go to, I'll be like, you're making this very complex, and like, I need you. You could have simplified this. So it was just certain things that I picked up. I was like, right, I want to be able to share this with the power of autonomy. I don't want anyone to ever feel like they need to work with me, but it's a power of choice. I want to take this complex muscle and really simplify it and make it accessible. Did I know the how straight off the back? No. But I knew my values and beliefs. And it's like, I'm going to study this and work really hard behind the scenes, because I want to be, if I want to be the greatest coach that I can be, then I need to have the experience and put the work in. But also I know that we have mirror neurons, right? So the people that I was surrounded with had no idea of what it even was. So we were going, well, you're going to leave your job and you're going to be a mental performance coach. Like, what is that? So I seeked the best in the world. And they're literally, when it comes to mental performance, because there's a very fine line, especially now the sort of gatekeepers have been removed. So before it was kind of like, he was either a psychologist, a counselor, or therapist, and they're great and we need them. I'm none of those. Yeah. I managed to come across just a phenomenal guy called Trevor Moawad. He's got an amazing book out. He owns Moawad Consultancy, and I literally just reached out to him every single day. Like, so, you know, he works for the NBA, the NFL, and yeah, then he replied back, and I was just certain. I was like, this is what I want to do. Can you help me with the how?
Wow. Interesting. Well, let's get into that. What is mental performance coaching?
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so I work in the area of sport, and I work with elite athletes as a one-to-one coach or working with teams. But I also work within corporate and driven individuals. So across the board, I work with driven humans. As a mental performance coach with elite athletes, I'm a part of a team. So, you know, for an athlete, and especially when you're looking at the elite, and I'm very blessed and fortunate that, you know, and every single person I work with is through word of mouth recommendation. That was something that I wanted to be a part of my journey. Great coaches know that they cannot provide a master in every area for their athletes, and they reach out to great coaches. So we know obvious areas, right? So an athlete will have a physio. So even if their coach has an understanding, they don't then do the treatment unless they're a master physio, you know, a therapist. They will outsource a physio. The same as nutrition. But mind was always overlooked. Or it was seen that, oh, you just go and see the psychologist when you've got a mental block or when you've got performance anxiety. And I was like, no, there's so much more. And then I remember my husband showing me CrossFit, and I was listening to Greg Glassman talk, you know, and it's functional fitness. And everything that he was saying, my mind was processing the exact same way as the mind. I'm like, this is a self-development sport, because you can be at whatever level you want to choose to do it, you can do it. This is the same as the mind. And then being multifunctional, this is the same as the mind. The mind does need therapy sometimes, and that's 100% okay. The same as we don't think twice about going to a physio, but now look at the difference. Like, I look at my stepdad, he was such a hard worker, and he could have torn his Achilles and he'll just strap it up with an old sock and drag his leg to work, you know, and make do. You'll never see an elite athlete do that, or if they ever did neglect listening to their body about that injury, they generally have an experience with that causes pain, that they make a change and they start investing in having physio regularly. But we never attach that to self, like, oh no, I'm weak, look, I'm going to a physio. But anything with the mind, we do. Yet it's multifunctional. Yet we can learn the skill to develop our mental strength. We can learn the skill and understanding of, you know, self-care, of resilience, of mindfulness, and they're all different skills. And some of us can do some of them quite naturally. You know, confidence is a state of mind. It's not a thing. We're not just in it all the time. And then we require this to do so much output in everything that we do. But how do we know to exercise and put it in? No one would run a marathon eating one cracker and never exercising beforehand. Or if they did, just because they believed they could, they'd only get so far, and then their body's just going to go and shut down and say, like, no, we're not fueled right. And then that's the way that I looked at what happened to me. You know, we're very good at labelling things. I don't label it. I can look back now, and that day when I wanted to take my own life, I just see that my mind, because I hadn't put anything in of benefit, and just this emotion and pain, it was just on shutdown, like disconnect. And that thought is like the quickest route for that, because it's always looking for the quickest way.
Got it. So I just wanted to kind of clarify, because I was having a look, and there's quite a few terminologies for what you do. There's, you know, there's mental coaching, there's mental health coaching, there's mental performance coaching. What term do you usually use?
Okay, so I'm a mental performance coach, but my focus isn't just in results, but it is very much around result. I focus on health, well-being, and peak performance, because the reality of it is our mental health is the foundation. Our well-being is at the fulfillment side. You know, that backing up peak performance, it's a whole different experience for athletes. But we're not educated this way. We were never, emotional intelligence is not taught in schools now, and it certainly won't taught in schools now. And then also it all depends on the coach that you're conditioned and brought up around. Because very much their beliefs will become your beliefs, especially if they're fixed mindset. So it's covering all areas. You know, success is a formula, but fulfillment is an art.
No, wow. So what does mental performance coaching look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So depending on, we are so individual. So the reality of it is, when I first come into this, I had the intentions of, you know, there's so many ways you can get good to great. But the reality of it is, the only calls that I were getting were sort of like secret squirrel calls. And that was from people with their backs against the wall, like total mental burnout, not knowing what to do. So I was like, whoa, I didn't even realise this. So from the beginning, I've literally worked with people from burnout to podium, and then from the podium to maintain that. And now they have really healthy habits, skills and rituals in place that they don't ever go back there. So it would look like, the way that I look at it is exactly the same way as any form of programming and training. Yeah, again, we don't think twice when we turn up to a gym if you've got a PT, and the PT would say, right, what's your goal? Yeah, but then they're going to want to get a few stats off you. I don't know, it depends on how they work, but they might want to know what your weight is now if you've got a weight goal, or, you know, if it's more specific and you want to be lifting certain weights. They're going to know where you're at, where you want to go. So then you can look at what that's going to take. This is exactly the same. You know, an athlete does not need to be in peak performance state all day, every day, and that's not maintainable. We literally drive the peaking 2-3 weeks before a competition. Most of what we do is development, and doing it with a place of autonomy. So they have full control and understanding of this at every given moment. Whether that's learning to relax. So there's certain traits in certain people. Super driven humans. So, you know, elite athletes are driven humans, but they've attached their drive to their sport. You know, elite pianists are driven humans, and they've just attached that focus and drive to their pianoing, right? So me, I am driven. So I've just attached that to my passion and love for what I do. But there's a lot of conditioning that comes in the way, you know, seeking perfection, fear of failing. So understanding now, the term failure can be quite complex because we all internalize different things as a form of failing. So one-to-one is, you know, I feel very fortunate. It's, you know, there's a saying that gets used a lot in the old way of physical coaching, and it still happens now, where someone says to another person, trust me. Yeah, so there's your program. Someone's like, what am I doing? Trust me. It's like, you know, I'm concerned for anyone that says to someone, trust me, because trust is earned. And we earn that by creating the awareness. So when I work alongside athletes, it's not a dictatorship, it's a relationship. And I want to know, you know, who's their biggest influences. So it'd be if it's their coach, their physio, but we're now their team. So I want to know how they work. And I ask a lot of questions at first because I want to understand how this person works, because then I'm going to come aligned with that. It's not going to be a dictatorship. It's like, meditate, have a cold shower. Then it's like, there are so many ways you can approach this, but why don't we look at what can meditation bring to the table? I can let you know, it's very simple actually. The mind is either in a sympathetic state, so that's like our primal, flight, freeze, or a parasympathetic state, the rest and digest. Well, meditation activates the mind into a parasympathetic state. So this is why you don't have to love it, or you want to be a yoga, and you don't have to meditate for like 6 hours of the day. But even just trying and bringing in 10 minutes of guided, and I always suggest guided because then we've just got to listen and apply, meditation is going to activate your mind in that rest and digest state, which is a much more effective way to start your day.
What's usually the results from doing meditation like that for athletes?
So if you go from athlete and we filter all the way down, because I also suggest this to, if we look at that, people that are striving in their work or relationships, and they're just super driven. Yeah, I believe, I know that everyone would benefit from more effective self-care, self-development, and better habits and rituals. It's just, there's been such a big gap for so long. Like, oh no, well, I'm not an elite athlete. Neither am I. But, I'm demanding this to put massive output in all my different caps, because we all wear different caps. I want to be the best mum that I can be. So I need to understand, well, what does that mean? Well, I want to be emotionally available. That takes energy. That's an output. I want to be the best coach that I can be. Well, to be a best coach, it's probably my most comfortable cap as well as the mum. But the business side, that takes way more output for me. So I've got the business cap, I've got the wife cap. If I want to be present and purposeful in each one, I'm now demanding this to put a mass output. So what can I give it? We know the science is there. Sleep, nutrition are so important. Yet most of us everyday people that haven't got this accountability from professionals totally neglect that on the belief of whatever belief we're running off of. So the benefits of incorporating 10 minutes meditation. One, you're actually telling yourself that you matter because you're doing something for you. Two, over a period of time, so give it a couple of weeks, you will feel the difference. You feel that little bit more patient. You can be a bit more logical. But just that alone isn't going to work. You know, we only know what we know until we learn more. Many of us had the belief that we stopped our learning when we finished school.
Mm.
And most of us are in autopilot. We're in autopilot 46.6% of the time.
It's true.
So this is what's so great about exercise, and what is so great about CrossFit in particular, of all different sports, so many different sports, is repetition of the same thing, especially if it's sport specific. With CrossFit, it's allowing you to get comfortable being uncomfortable, learning something new, which means you have to be conscious doing it. When you consciously apply a new thing over time, it then becomes your new subconscious level. You know, we're saying over 1,400 words a minute to ourselves. Most of our self-talk is on autopilot, and most of it is conditioned and not even ours, but we still run off of it.
So let's go more into like generalized questions for mindset for the everyday athlete who, you know, they just want tips on mindset performance coaching.
Yeah.
So what tips would you give any athlete who feels stressed and under pressure before an event in particular?
So this is very normal. Yeah. Pre-game jitters, it can be called. This is really about or performance anxiety, you know, and everyone deals with this differently. So I was very fortunate. I was the first female mindset coach actively coaching with two of the athletes that I work with at the CrossFit Games. And being back there and seeing across the board, because this is what I do all the time. I'm always looking at people's behavior. This is what I do. You know, it blew my mind that even at that level, there were so many. So step one, acknowledge what's in your control. So what are you thinking about? Because most of what we think about is outside of ourselves and uncontrollable. What other competitors are going to do? Oh, they can lift more than me, or they're faster than me, or I haven't run as much as I should have. Yeah, uncontrollable. Judges, uncontrollable. The weather, uncontrollable. The rig, uncontrollable. So when you acknowledge what's uncontrollable, now focus is on what is in your control. And then be realistically optimistic. You know, is this your first competition? Is this their sixth competition? What's their why in competing? I know there's a big thing about, well, what's your why? But, you know, for this particular competition, what is your why? So when I work with the elite athletes and now they can compete at sanctional events all year, you know, their main objective is to cash out at the CrossFit Games. So now I support them in looking at how they view sanctionals differently, because when you're competitive, you always want to win. Yeah? But when you're looking at the long game, okay, what am I using this for? What am I going to test? Right, well, one of my objectives was I wanted to enjoy it more. Okay, so let's practice that. Well, how can I do that? You know, when I feel myself getting tired and that negative self-talk, you know, our negative cognitive bias, we're 80% negative in self-talk anyway. So whatever you say to yourself in training, it's very unlikely you could just switch it up in competing unless you have the belief that I can always turn it on game day. The power of our belief system, you know, what we believe affects our emotions, affects our actions, and affects our results. So you see this all the time. There were people in training that maybe don't put as much effort in, but then they say to them, I can always switch it up. And they just go out there and do that. And then there's some people that really focus on dynamic training, but they will say, oh no, but I get really nervous. And we can always link that. Generally, that's come from somewhere in the past. So we only look back to go forward. But there is some real purposeful tools that you can use. Breathing. Real purposeful breathing just gets you back present. Cueing yourself. You know, putting that athlete. The competitive athlete cap is so different to the training cap. When you're in training, it's the learn and grow process. That training is for failing with purpose. Competition is 10%, anything goes. So the way that I explain it and look at it is training every day is an opportunity to deposit in the athlete bank. We need to have adversity as well in there, because otherwise you won't know how to overcome that. CrossFit is a sport designed to test mental fitness as well as physical fitness.
I agree.
So there's always adversity put there. So every day you're depositing in the athlete bank. So when it comes to competition, that's cash out day. So when we talk about confidence being a state of mind, The athletes that I work with, they actually learn to dial in the competence on the work they've put in, the competence in the progress they've made, because you can only cash out on what you have. It doesn't matter with other opponents if you know their times, and that's a very natural thing that I work on a lot with athletes, this self-comparison, social comparison.
Right, yeah.
And then you've got to understand, for the elite that I work with, like the 1%, you know, the top 5, they have other pressures that they have to learn to deal with. Like, they understand it's a non-negotiable, it takes what it takes. They have the pressure of knowing that the world and spectators are watching them. You know, they can't hide from anything because it's going to unfold in front of everyone. They have to learn to deal with social media pressures, and it all comes from knowing themselves enough. Because if they can walk out there and know, you know, I gave the best what I've got. I've deposited, I've learned, I've grown, and now I'm going to step it up and cash out. That's how they access a more purposeful flow state. But for each one, it's so individual.
Well, no, that's very good. I mean, let's go back to self-talk. How important do you think self-talk is, and what tips would you give to someone who's quite negative in self-talk, and to, you know, bring them out from that pit?
Yeah, we all have negative self-talk. And we're saying over 1,400 words a minute to ourselves. Our belief systems, like our true belief, is if we can look at that. So I kind of look at this as like upgrading. I have not got I've not got my first phone. I wouldn't be able to use it and do what we're doing now, right? If I did, I wouldn't be able to connect with the people that I connect with my first phone. So my phone's upgraded. But the reality is, with my phone, I get very comfortable with it. So when it comes to upgrade, I'm like, oh, do I really need to? Do I really need the extra memory or that better camera or fast? Because I'm familiar with it. I'm comfortable. But this is tangible, right? But then once you've got the upgrade and you get consciously used to it, well, no one even think about that old phone. And then it's like, oh, look, it's much more effective, much more faster. So we take the time to upgrade our phones. We take the time to put our cars in for MOTs. Majority of us take the time to go to the dentist, you know, for checkups. When have they ever learned to allow themselves to sit with themselves, check in with themselves, or check in with a coach like myself to upgrade their belief system, like what they still believe about themselves? And many of us don't. So most of our self-talk is autopilot. It's just running. And that's what they say. What would people think of you if you said out loud what you say about yourself to yourself in your head? Now, for us, for everyday people, you can get away with it. You get away with just getting by and not acknowledging it. You can say no to going out when actually the reason why you're saying no is because your self-talk's saying, well, you've got nothing to wear, well, you look a mess in that, and so it's going to avoid the pain, so just make an excuse, so I can't go out tonight. But if your truth was that you really did want to go out, then this is something that you should work on. Yeah, if you really want to go for that promotion, but the voice in your head's like, don't be silly, as if you would get it, and you know that you always mess it up once you're sitting there. But that's that negative self-talk. Right, well then this is a sign, this is something that you should work on. But yet again, for elite performers, athletes, leaders, it's a non-negotiable, and they either learn that through experience or because they've already been around someone that's aware or a great coach that acknowledges this, they start working on that straight away.
Wow. That's very good. I don't want to get onto another topic because I'm aware of your time. But what I'm thinking of doing is having you back on in a couple of weeks or something, maybe a couple of months. But I think I could listen to you forever. So where's the best place people can reach out to you and follow your work and reach out for any advice or for coaching?
Yeah, no, definitely. So for me, right now, we've sort of in a process of just really creating the awareness, and for coaches, because there are great coaches, to be able to access everything that I do, so they have that knowledge. So with that, I've worked very closely with a phenomenal coach, Greg Swanson, who's based out in America. And we have the only CrossFit acknowledged mental strength certification. And our values was for it to be of value and to really have everything that is required. It wasn't packaged to sell, but packaged to be of value. Very much aligned with how CrossFit have the CrossFit level 1. CrossFit level 2, CrossFit level 3. I'm like, well, I know there needs this for the mind. So we have the mental strength certification for any coaches or PTs that want to get that further education. But for me, I use Instagram just as a way to share the knowledge. I just want to see that as if someone wakes up, and I love waking up and getting messages like, thank you so much for sharing that. You know, I've now looked into that. I love getting messages of, hey, have you got any books that you could suggest to me? So Limitless Coaching on Instagram. Our website's just being redone at the moment, but if you go to the link tree on my bio, you can sign up to our weekly newsletter, which is Mind Fuel, which is just starting next week. Also have the phenomenal Lauren Tate, who's an amazing mental performance coach. She's the in-house performance coach for Group Strength. She has come on board, and we just continuously want to educate, create awareness, and provide the service away from the one-to-one as well. And that's what the purpose of our social media is, and everything that we put out on there.
Awesome. So Emma Hackett, that's all right, is it?
It is Hackett, yeah.
Emma Hackett at Limitless Coaching. Best to get her on Instagram. Thanks, Emma. Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. Honestly, we need more time to go through everything that you've got in your head. It's been amazing, but yeah, thank you so much.
No, that's okay. If there's anything specific, so anyone listening and they're like, well, actually I'd like to know more of this, and they message out to you,
yeah,
I'm more than happy to come on and discuss. This is what it's about, is we have to create the awareness first. So thank you for having me on board. I love what you do. You bring so much value and passion, and you're so committed into everything that you do, so I wish you all the best as well, and I look forward to coming back on again.
Awesome. Brilliant.